Tonight we're going to talk about the ancient mysteries and the modern mysteries. Just give me a second to let the computer, the laptop catch up so I can see the chat. And this is an amazing subject, and it's also an absolutely massive subject. There is a huge, huge amount of information potentially that we could discuss that relates to this subject. There are many different mystery schools, and there are a bunch of totally garbage. I guess I should have adjusted this before. The lag makes it really difficult. Okay, there we go. That's good. Where'd everybody go? The uh, the modern mystery schools that have proliferated are largely garbage. We'll talk a little bit about some of that. Um, the main mysteries that I've always been interested in are the Eleusinian mysteries and the Greek mysteries, and there is uh, there's a connection with the Egyptian mystery schools that a lot of people call the cult of Isis. Although I don't really like the term cult because cult kind of implies mind control and brainwashing and reduction of access to knowledge. And the mystery schools are the exact opposite. The mystery schools, you mean from now or from before? The mysteries basically offer what religion does not. And the resurgence of interest in the mysteries has tremendous value because it's about allowing science and reason to dovetail with spirituality. Um, oh, I see. Um, okay, well, we should be good now. So, spirituality, reason, earthly knowledge, right? Our critical thinking apparatus, our ability to reason, our knowledge of science, all of these things inform our spiritual existence and our spiritual knowledge. They are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary. They are essential. In these mystery schools, everyone was sort of like a scholar and a priest, and this is the real, the true path of the wise. Um, and so it is the rediscovery, the redintegration of mystery school practices and mentality and approach into our modern spiritual grab bag, our palette, right? That really gives us hope of having a successful transformation this time around. I want to warn everybody that's interested in these subjects. There are a lot of fake mystery schools. It's become trendy. There's this organization called Earth Pulse that was based here in Vilcabamba. I actually went to have lunch with him. I've told the story on the channel before, or dinner, and expecting I found a kindred spirit because they're going to be facilitating ayahuasca. And it turned out that, I mean, I asked him like, what mysteries have you studied or taken initiation in? And his answer was, I really need to get around to that. They already had a $4,000 course available online that you could sign up for and pay 4 grand to learn about mysteries that this guy had not even studied. And that's really the standard. And people can get away with it because admission into the mysteries has always been exclusive. It's esoteric, right? A lot of people don't realize that esoteric really actually means that it's knowledge that's available to like a core group of people. That it's not as it is expressed in many of the mystery traditions. It's not for the profane, and a lot of people think that there's sort of a malevolent intention um, that is the reason for the secrecy. But part of the reason for secrecy, as the Kabbalion says, is that the ears of wisdom are closed, or the lips of wisdom are closed, but to the ears of understanding. Um, and this isn't about exclusivity for the sake of exclusivity. It's about the fact that anything worth teaching can only be learned through experience. And in fact, a lot of the Masonic mysteries, the Masonic secrets, are secrets not just because they don't want this powerful knowledge to escape into the hands of the average uninitiated person. It's also just the simple fact that what you're looking for is to catalyze an internal process in the person that results in actual change. And this is kind of the difference between the approach in the mysteries and the sort of doctrinal approach of religious study. The religious people, to varying degrees, focus more on sort of trying to condition oneself to adhere to a set of rules and dogmas. And that's not spirituality, that's a cult. Um, and so it's much more effective to catalyze process in an initiate and have them actually undergo the transmutation, of lead into gold, the lead of everyday experience into the gold of higher consciousness. And this is something that uh, what was cultivated over the centuries in the mystery schools, and they had the advantage of being very, very, very old. It appears that we can trace the lineage of the mysteries back to Egypt, maybe Syria and Babylonia before. But generally, for our purposes, the important line of transmission is from, Thoth or whoever that was. And there are various theories about who Thoth might have been, if it was an actual person, if it was an interdimensional being or an extraterrestrial. But regardless of the particulars, the Egyptian mysteries are sort of presided over by Thoth as the Hierophant and the scribe of the gods. And so there are legends that Moses received initiation when he was adopted by the pharaohs as a baby floating down the river, that whole story. And there is unexpected evidence that this is actually true found in the Old Testament. A lot of people talk about how the burning bush was actually a bush full of DMT and it got Moses high. Maybe it was acacia or something. And that's actually completely ridiculous. There's actually no plant except for the seeds of Wilca or Yopo, the Adenanthera, that can be smoked that will give you an effect from DMT. So the whole burning bush, I mean, it doesn't matter if you built a bonfire and stuck your head up, like it just isn't going to happen, period, end of story. So that's not true. However, there is in the Old Testament, I was just speaking with a Israeli friend of mine the other day, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the Hebrew word, but he said the literal translation is to make drugs. And it's when they're making, I think it was the Kanahe ointment. Um, and so there is some evidence that Moses had learned what I suspect to be a brew that was most likely, because of the area that they're in, would have been Syrian rue and acacia. So it would have been a very ayahuasca-like beverage. And so the transmission of the mysteries from Egypt to Pythagoras, this is like the next really important I almost want to call him a landmark, but recipient of the mystery teachings. And so it's from Pythagoras that we get the secret handshakes and the pentagrams drawn over the doors. And you see this study of numerology and occult mixed with study of the natural sciences and the pursuit of worldly knowledge in congruence with a search for spiritual illumination and deeper meaning. And so we have the Eleusinian mysteries as well, which definitely had their roots in the Pythagorean mysteries. And this is where Socrates and Plato and all of these Greek luminaries would have consumed the beverage that is pretty much unanimously agreed by historians to have been some sort of psychoactive brew. And I would suggest that some scholars have looked back at ancient Greece and they say, you know, why did we have these extraordinary leaps in consciousness, and they're philosophically centuries ahead of, I mean, Plato conceived of the atom thousands of years before there was the technology that was required to describe it, right? I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. And so I would suggest that what catalyzed their consciousness to such a degree was this entheogenic beverage. Um, And so, over, and this is just a synopsis, I guess, by the way, we're just kind of doing an overview as it relates to Western culture in the present. And so from those mysteries, they've kind of descended down to us in the form of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the York Rite of Freemasonry, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the OTO, Crowley's AA, and these various secret societies all base themselves on various mysteries. And there are mysteries within mysteries. Um, of course, so when you say the mysteries, by the way, you can be talking about the mysteries of number, which would be like numerology, or the mystery of the Rosy Cross. So within the mystery schools, there are studies of these individual mysteries. Someone asked about the Rosy Cross and kind of erroneously attributed to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's actually much older than that. It's the Rosicrucian Cross. And it's a very, very complex symbol, and we are going to break it down in the second half of this. So if you're interested in that, stick around for that. So, and so since we're mentioning Masons and the modern mysteries, the left-hand path, schools like the OTO, it's a good time to mention that the reputation that the mysteries have in their modern form of being potentially nefarious is unfortunately not totally unfounded. There are different schools of thought, and these are generally separated into the left-hand path and the right-hand path, or the Black Brothers and the White Brotherhood. And there are also some of the older mysteries that had some pretty questionable practices. We had the temple prostitute, which I don't think is really a questionable mystery practice, but she was considered holy and venerable and an oracle, and a very different view of prostitute than we have in our modern culture, for sure. But I mentioned omophagia in the description, and I just want to. It's only fair to go into this a little bit because it's one of the ubiquitous rumors about Freemasonry and the Illuminati, and even people in Hollywood today. And it actually does have roots in reality, which would be a shock to a lot of people, and probably the dismay of a lot of people. But in some of the ancient mysteries, it has been unearthed without doubt that omophagia, which is the eating of raw infants, was actually a thing that was practiced in some of the more obscure mystery cults. But I've often wondered if this practice has not maybe been preserved up until the present day. I have to admit that I was a little bit perturbed to discover that um, this rumor, I mean, I can only assume that that came from someone researching the mysteries and discovering that this had occurred um, in ancient Greece and maybe Babylonia. But yeah, omophagia, I would hope that they had to come up with a term for that, but that actually is the technical term for eating raw infants, and it was a practice of at least a couple of the mystery schools. So yeah, that's what I was getting at. My suspicion is that the entheogenic brew actually originated in Egypt, and Pythagoras was said to have traveled to Egypt to take initiation in the mysteries of Isis, and then he traveled back to Greece and he formed his own Pythagorean uh, school, secret society. And just like modern Freemasons, they had secret handshakes, they had secret words, they had secret practices, and they, had identifying marks, which was primarily the pentagram was drawn above their door, which the Rothschilds allegedly do that to this day. Um, but again, you guys, you can't, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think just because we have some bad apples that have used the secret doctrine knowledge to empower themselves and potentially maybe enslave an entire planet, um, that's one of the applications of the secret doctrine, and putting it in action. And I think that it's almost unavoidable that if you come up with processes that accelerate the development of human consciousness, it really gives those people an edge over the people around them. Because one of the first things that happens when you become psychedelic, I guess, is that you have a next level understanding of human psychology. The people around you suddenly seem very simple and automatic, and they're operating very largely on their subconscious because they haven't had a lot of hemisync going on in their life. So it becomes very easy to manipulate. And I think that that's unfortunately one of the unavoidable consequences of the expansion of consciousness. I think it's also sort of a misconception that enlightenment and illumination has this relationship to becoming more kind and gentle and good. That can happen, but I don't think that it is necessarily a given. I mean, I know for certain that you can attain very high elevated states of consciousness and still retain quite a bit of ego and even malice. Um, and that's how the universe would have it, and that's one of the things the mysteries teach. And one of the reasons that initiation was sort of guarded, and that only certain people are really, it's only applicable to certain people, um, is in part not only for the protection of the general public, but for the people themselves. Because when you move into these realms of expanded consciousness, there's all sorts of potential for insanity, for ego inflation, for delusion. And so it's a very slippery slope. In fact, I think that we have a pretty big problem right now with how do you say, like, fake shaman and people that have good intentions but don't actually have the qualifications, sort of guiding and teaching people. And in a lot of the, I guess, demographics like the New Age, you don't really have the integration of an equal pursuit of scientific knowledge and the cultivation of reason and critical thinking in order to balance the spiritual development and to guide and make sure that people stay grounded and are able to separate the wheat from the chaff and the lead from the gold. Yeah, I mean, he's talking about how Crowley and Blavatsky and Gurdjieff had tempers. I think that's one of the big misconceptions of the modern era, I guess, but it goes way longer than that back, that people want to believe that their spiritual leaders and prophets are absolutely pure and that they have no faults and that they are never destructive. But, I think that, what's his name? The guy that killed his wife and he has a big long beard and um, he's an Indian guy, not Osho, but he looks just like him. I can't remember his name. What is that guy's name? You guys know who I'm talking about. His name almost implies that he's fake. God damn it, what the hell is that guy's name? Anyways, that guy, I mean, he seems like he's relatively enlightened. A lot of the things that he said probably help people, but he killed his wife. I don't care what he says. He killed his wife. Yeah, Sadhguru, fake guru. And that's kind of an extreme case, but you look at Terence McKenna. I talk about this a lot, how he fudged his numbers to make the novelty theory work and fooled all of us. All of us were fooled. We just assumed that he was just that smart and knew what he was doing, and none of us could do the math ourselves. So he knew that. And it wasn't until a really advanced mathematician made his autopsy of a mathematical theory and presented it to Terence McKenna shortly before he died, that it was really ascertained that Terence McKenna deliberately engineered his math to prove something that wasn't real. And I don't think it wasn't real. I think that his math just didn't actually prove it. But he sought validity through deception. And that's insane to think that someone like Terence McKenna would do that, but he did. And I don't think that invalidates the, thousands and thousands of pages and probably a few thousand hours of brilliant, profound, important work and messages that he conveyed to people. But it's just a reminder that, no one is perfect. And that, we have an unrealistic conception of what, prophets and seers and mystics and shamans really are. And I think it also contributes to putting them up on a pedestal, which is also extremely unhealthy. We have to remember that, part of the modern mystery training is to harmonize your four worlds, Braya and Atzilut and Nechama and Yetzirah, the Ruach, the different layers of the soul, and to find that balance. And so basically the mystery traditions, the most important, I think, thing to understand about it, and what we need to incorporate into our own lives, what we need to take away from the mysteries basically, is that by not like we don't know this already, that's why I'm almost hesitating to speak, but through the use of entheogenic compounds and a very disciplined and structured set of techniques, we are able to really catalyze human consciousness to go light years beyond where your average dildo is. And, as evidence of this, I would offer James, I think Franco was his name, this researcher that devised this experiment wherein a whole bunch of scientists had to have a problem they had been stuck on for, I think it was 8 months. And then they took high doses of LSD and 90% of them solved their problem. If we consider that we know that entheogens are a catalyst of that power, of that kind of potential, it really explains how it is that the adepts of the mystery schools were catapulted beyond the rest of humanity, and how that allowed them to constrain the forces of nature, to engineer empires, and to conceptualize of things like atoms 2,000 years before we had the technology to actually physically discover them. And so now, at the request of Fernando, I'm going to get a book that I left over there to assist me in this next part, because it's a really sophisticated subject. But what I want to do to kind of illustrate how these mystery teachings work is go through this. I'll check his name when we get the book, but he's a very advanced OTO initiate, an adept, I guess. And but before I do that, I'll give you guys a few clues as to what exactly it is that we are learning to perceive when we talk about expanding our consciousness and learning to read the scripture that's writ large upon the land. And that is from Albert Pike's book, Morals and Dogma. He was a 33rd degree Freemason. And the exact quote is, the true scriptures are writ large upon the land. And so what he's referring to is that, this merger of science and reason and spirituality that was sort of the essence of the mystery practices. Um, what that allows us to do is to make not only our observations of the natural world, and as we advance in the sciences, our observations in quantum physics and other realms of science, and we can sort of extrapolate metaphors, and we can see the fundamentals of all of these different systems at work in all of the other systems. And there's a lot that can be derived from that. But then there's also contemplation of the mysteries that are mysteries, like synchronicity, for example. And this one, when I did the Lucifer mysteries live stream, I think last night, I forgot to talk about this. And there's actually a couple of elements of it. So what you start to see when you even look into the history of this stuff, and it's this thread of weirdness runs right through to the modern day, in the story of the psychedelic movement, which I absolutely consider an extension of the mysteries, the ancient mysteries. And as I said in the description, the ancient mysteries were a large part of the catalyst for the psychedelic renaissance, partly because people like Joseph Campbell and Gordon Wasson became interested in soma and the other beverages that were known to have been consumed in these mysteries. That was part of the drive to find these substances and to see what they could do. Um, so what you'll start to notice are these coincidences of an order of magnitude that's quite staggering. Pythagoras is himself one of those mysteries, and it corresponds to the Lucifer myth. So Lucifer is associated with like the sixth sense, with magic, with numerology, with music, right? He was supposed to be the court musician, the highest angel. And if you don't know the myth that well, watch my live stream from last night, because we really went into a lot of depth, and it's actually really interesting when you translate it all into a metaphor for process. But so anyways, so we have all these characteristics of Lucifer, and then we have Pythagoras, who gave us the intervals of the modern Western musical scale. He worked a lot with numerology and the occult. The pentagram was the symbol of his his initiates, drawing it above their door and all that sort of stuff. And his name actually translates to the old serpent or the old dragon. Now, I don't think I have to explain to you how weird that is, that we have this, physical world persona that is an exact reflection of this mythological being from this other culture, and he has all of the attributes, as if he was an avatar of Lucifer. And my understanding of consciousness and how it all works, that is basically true. That the Promethean archetype basically is what Lucifer really is, and it's just a modality of consciousness. So that's one of these sort of manifestations of the mysteries. And some people might relegate that to the bin of pure coincidence, but I think that's a bit ridiculous. And in my studies of the mysteries and my searching to ascertain what in the hell is going on with all of this stuff, you sort of, these things accumulate to an extent that, it gets harder and harder to dismiss them as coincidence. I'll give you another example. Um, the plant medicines, ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, marijuana even, that expand consciousness. If you think about Lucifer as this Promethean force, this urge to illuminate and to pursue knowledge of the divine realm, and then you look at the effect that these plants have, there are actually several coincidences beyond that. If you look at the chemical name for psilocybin, phosphor is in the center of it, and phosphorus is another analog to Lucifer, the shining one, in the Roman mythology. So that was a little bit weird. It's like this idea of glowing, of light, is even present in the chemical name of psilocybin. And that's a little bit eerie, but this next thing is quite a bit stranger. Cannabis, right, is often called the devil's lettuce, or Satan's, what is it? The devil's lettuce, or, well, whatever. The devil's, Lucifer's lettuce, the devil's cabbage, whatever, but Lucifer's lettuce, let's call it. And so Pythagoras, one of the things he's most well known for, of course, is the triangle. Well, if you've studied the Western mystery traditions, you know that the triangle is used to contain a demon if you wish to converse with a demon and constrain them to your purposes. And so we all know the eye in the triangle, and there's another little secret that's kind of uncovered. Like, what are they implying with the eye in the triangle above the pyramid? Um, but so, you know, this is all backstory that leads back to this marijuana thing, right? And so part of the Lucifer myth that I forgot to tell last night is that an emerald was said to have fallen from his crown and it landed on the earth. Well, the place where they grow Lucifer's lettuce was called the Emerald Triangle. So, you know, these are the kind of indications that it's like the universal mind has these sort of markers, like a trail of crumbs that you would leave in the forest in order to find your way home, these weird synchronistic clues. And one of the main guiding principles, you have to remember that nothing is ever as it, right? So taking these things at face value and saying maybe something like, oh, so pot really is evil, that's not the point at all. And so you have to contemplate these things more deeply. And, you know, it's also totally possible that there is absolutely no real connection. All right, so give me a second. We're going to go way further down the rabbit hole. So contemplation of geometries and their function, their purpose. Oh, by the way, you guys, don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe. We're demonetized, so we get no money for this. So support us on Patreon or Zelle or PayPal or Cash App or cryptocurrency. Sending BNB is very helpful to the addresses that are in the description and in the chat. I'm trying to raise $3,000 right now so that we can go with the Schwar friend into the jungle and do some important work. The kids are they're dying. I'm gonna make a video about this. It's horrible. If you get the water in your mouth, it has mercury in it that your skin bubbles up, and man, it's horrendous. And so we're trying to raise some awareness and raise some funds so that we can actually make ourselves useful. I mean, I'm trapped in Ecuador. I might as well do something good. These people have given us medicine that could save our culture. The least we can do is try not to destroy theirs. So that's something I'm working on. And our t-shirts are finally ready. So I'm going to have the designs links will be in all the descriptions to all my videos by tomorrow. The Born Against Christians design is awesome. The iconoclast, illuminated triclops wear is the clothing line. But you know, again, all of the sales from this stuff will go to help fund these attempts at helping indigenous people as long as we're still here. Okay, so we're going to talk about the secrets of the Rose Cross, and let me show you this thing first. Here is the Rosy Cross. Hope you can see it. That little white dot in the very center is going to be important to all of this. Oh, and so the author's name is Lon Milo Duquette, and he's an adept of the OTO, which is it's another one of those strange things about the mysteries and these patterns that you'll find. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was formed by MacGregor Mathers and Wynne Westcott. I think he was a medical doctor, but they were both 33rd degree Masons. And so one of the rules of Freemasonry is that if you are a 33rd degree or higher, there actually is something above the 33rd degree of which we know but do not speak. And you won't even find anything on the internet about that, I don't think. But it's true, there is something above the 33rd degree. An abscissimist, basically. He's a good musician. I don't know who we're talking about. Okay, so these two 33rd degree Masons broke off from the main, core body of Freemasonry. And whoa, I was saying one of the rules is that a 33rd degree can form a new line, a new lineage, and it's legitimate. the Scottish Rite has sort of broken its own rules by refusing to acknowledge the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, the Stella Matutina. None of the rest of them are real, by the way. And the OTO was also formed by two 33rd degree Masons. And this is another situation where your learnings and the mysteries can really serve you, because everything has its antinomical corollary, right? It's antinomy, it's opposite balancing it. And so Westcott and Mathers were brothers of the right hand path. They were white brotherhood, sort of Christian mystic style guys, right? And on the left hand path, we had the OTO guys, which were all drugs and sex magic. And so there's two 33rd degrees on the left hand, and then two 33rd degrees on the right hand path that form these splinter Masonic groups. So it's all super trippy. Okay, so the secrets of the Rose Cross. Let's see where I should begin. Your patience will be rewarded. The beautiful rose cross that appears on the back of each card in the Thoth Tarot deck is where these images are. Is the first that attracted me to the Thoth Tarot. It is Lady Harris's exquisite interpretation of the Hermetic Rose Cross, and is arguably the most recognizable feature of the deck. It was clear to me, even as a novice, that the large red, blue, yellow, and green squares that form the extremities of the arms and the cross could represent the four tarot suites of wands, cups, swords, and discs. And so, it's good to bear in mind that each of those represents emotions, an element. So again, we have this idea of sort of concressing correspondence, so that we're able to communicate a lot more information much more efficiently in these, concressed symbols. And this is an important aspect of all magical traditions. Sigil writing is sort of the same concept. And each of the 22 petals of the Great Rose represented the 22 trump cards. One afternoon after lodge convocation, I was smugly sharing these observations with another neophyte when I was soundly upbraided by an elderly senior member who fixed his gray gaze on me and with the most solemn tone informed me, "You have seen but the earliest of rays." And so he goes on to basically explain that this adept was like, "You don't know anything about this. It's so much more complicated that you could possibly conceive of." And so uh, the the tarot deck, he explains, is a map of the entire universe, the mystery of how the universe was created, how it is sustained, and where you and I fit into it has been the spiritual quest of fools and holy men and women since the dawn of human consciousness. For centuries, students and sages of Hebrew mysticism have developed a unique spiritual science called Kabbalah. Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is not a religion, philosophy, or doctrine. It is a way of thinking, a way of looking at the world, a convenient method by which we dissect, examine, and organize the universe and ourselves. It is a means by which we connect everything in the universe with everything else in the universe. Numbers are the basic working tools of this marvelous discipline, and some of the most important numbers in cosmologistic cosmology are precisely the same numbers upon which the tarot is constructed. So the point, and this is interesting for me, or it was when I got this book, because I and I've talked about this particular vision on this channel many times, but I once consumed a very strong dose of ayahuasca, and ayahuasca showed me the process of creation, how it started with this nothing that became conscious, and then that nothing sort of developed like a skin around it, which is, there's the Ein Sof hour. We'll talk about that in a second, but the different veils of negative existence. And I watched this all happen, and how, awareness of itself created two, but then that awareness actually makes three. And so I watched this process of watch the energy divide and take shape. And it went through this process of reflecting, and it's described exactly the way I saw it in this book. And we're going to get there in a second. But that was quite quite an interesting moment. He does a well. it's not him. It's how the tree of life actually describes all of this. Um, and so, in the center of the cross, in the center of the rose, there's a minute white point at the heart of the tiny rose, the very center of the design. The white point symbolizes the shining point of pure existence, without size and as yet without position. It is not really a point at all, but a state of infinite potentiality. It is the germ of creation before creation begins. As we will soon see, this point is the inscrutable nail that crucifies the tiny rose to the tiny cross. It also affixes the small rose cross to the large rose cross. This is, by the way, another example of proof when the Kabbalion talks about how the secret doctrine, the teachings of Hermes, the teachings of Thoth, which are actually one and the same, because it's really just about our higher self making observations and drawing conclusions and then feeding them down to our pathetic little, human consciousness. But the real meaning of Jesus on the cross is about to be explained, and so. Again, I always talk about how the reason people are so drawn to the major religions is because they have within them the skeletal framework of these mystery teachings, which are the true metaphysical. I don't want to say doctrine, but it's just a description of what is there. And so people resonate very strongly with the truth because there's something in all of us that actually knows it, and so they perceive the truth, but then unfortunately they're deluded with all of the baggage that has been draped over their chosen fairy tale. So let's continue on with our discussion of the point. Um, just where the point came from is a supreme mystery, and Kabbalists have soared to dizzying altitudes of speculation and argument in their attempts to understand and explain it. One very popular theory involves three inscrutable qualities of nothingness that, in the dawn of pre-creation, somehow ended up focusing or contracting to a point. They called these three veils Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Aur. Ein is nothing that is so nothing that it negates the concept of nothing as an absence of something. In other words, we can't even say it is nothing because there is no it and there is no is in this kind of nothing. Ein Sof is the next stage of this process, limitless nothing, nothing defined. There is now an it in the statement, it is nothing. So this is the moment of awareness. And then immediately after the fracturing, the limitless light pours forth. There is now an it and an is in the statement, it is nothing. I won't drag us deeper into these misty musings. I only bring it up because, as we'll soon see, there's one tarot card, the Fool, that characterizes this, these wonderful non-states of nothingness. But we'll meet the Fool soon enough. Let's get back to the point. One of my favorite secret streams that I've done, if you're not a patron, you can actually access all of the Patreon content that I've ever made. There is a really, really long commentary that I did on the chapter of the Fool and its relationship to zero and nothingness, because it really is the central secret and the most. It is the essence of everything, and it's. I think it's essential that you focus your full contemplative. Your full contemplative, what is the word, capacities on this nothingness for, until you really understand the things that are being communicated. Um, so let's get back to the point. Obviously, it is impossible to grasp the true nature of this pre-existent point, but it is the essence and identity of absolute deity. It is also the essence and identity of your own secret self, the real you that exists at the very center of all the things you mistakenly think are you. If you truly understand the nature of this point, you understand the nature of yourself and deity. A graphic artist or photographer would tell us that the massive and complex hermetic rose cross develops outwardly from the central point. A film director trying to illustrate this concept might want to start with a close-up of the point, then slowly move back to show how the various components of the cross develop. We won't do that. To see and understand the essence of this great design, we must go inside the point. We must zoom the camera of our imagination in, past the circumference, past the white nothingness, into the very heart of the germ of creation. Um, yeah, and it's not even just that nothing is everything. I think this nothing that they talk about as having suddenly developed awareness, which we might talk about as electromagnetic wave. um, and with light and consciousness, I think it's really a chicken or the egg kind of thing. I I don't know that we'll ever really understand, which came first. Um, but yeah, nothing. And here's the thing: everything contains its contradiction, right? So this everything is nothing. It sounds like this almost moronic lunatic logic, but ask any physicist, and they will tell you that solid matter is, what is it, 90% empty space. So it's quite literally true. And I think one of the most validating things about these mystery school teachings and the Western occult system and hermeticism and all of this stuff is the fact that science is, to quote, paraphrase Aleister Crowley, constantly rediscovering odd scraps of magical wisdom and making a great fuss about its cleverness. Um, Yeah, well, that's the thing. If nothing has something to contrast itself with, that means there's already an existence beyond that nothing. And so when we're talking about this primordial nothing, we can only have this absolute nothingness, because as soon as there's nothing and something else, there's two things. And so that's the paradox of oneness, that the only possible unity is actually nothing. Um, So where were we? The cubic stone. It's about to get weirder. Uh, when the haze of nothingness disappears, we are presented with the image of a cube of what appears to be plain white stone. The ancients symbolized the point as a white cubical stone that contains within itself the potential of all creation. When we take a moment to consider how a cube is constructed, we come face to face with the first great secret of the Kabbalah, and the answer to the question, why does the tarot have 22 trump cards? Um, First, in order to be a cube, a point needs to extend into three dimensions: up, down, right, left, front, and back. These three dimensions create seven positions, the center and six sides, that create 12 oblique points or edges to the cube. 3 plus 7 plus 12 equals 22. Kabbalistic tradition tells us this is how deity formed the 22 letters of the sacred Hebrew alphabet, by which all things in creation are verbally ordered into existence. I think that verbally is kind of an oversimplification. I think it would be better to just say that these are the rates of vibration. Because we're trying to translate these metaphors into an understanding of the actual process that occurred, and so interestingly, speaking of the Shuar, they actually say the same thing. Bay and these different sounds that they make during ayahuasca ceremonies that are supposed to um, be the well, the shaman called them syllables, but it's probably just a language barrier thing. It's not really quite the right word, but these sounds that created the universe. I haven't counted them, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that there are 22. Um, so, how crazy is that? In the jungles of South America and the desert of Egypt, or wherever it was that the tribe of Judea was wandering around, we have basically the same creation story. Uh, Okay, so the Hebrew alphabet is divided into three mother letters attributed to the three primitive elements, seven double letters attributed to the seven planets of the ancients, and 12 simple letters attributed to the 12 signs of the zodiac. Um, so Aleph is air, Mem is water, Shin is fire. I won't go through all of them because there's 22 of them. As long as the cube is sealed, creation is put on hold. So this point that was nothingness, that has now attained consciousness, has become a cube. In case you missed that part. Um, 20. Okay, as long as the cube is sealed, creation is put on hold, and these 22 magic power letters, these dimensions and positions and concepts, remain suspended in a state of brooding potentiality. They are like the invisible germ in the heart of the acorn that throbs with the potential of an eternity of future oak trees. In order for this sealed cube to initiate creation, it must sacrifice itself upon a cross by bursting open like a kernel of cosmic popcorn. And so we have here the uh, cube. You can see, I hope, let's see. Yeah, I mean, imagine you can see that has burst open and become a cross. And so creation begins, and we move from potentiality into actuality when, like a living stone, our white cube unfolds as a golden cross of 6 squares. Once opened, it reveals its secret treasure, a rose of 5 petals. And I guess, me and Mr. Duquette here, just revealed to you guys the great secret of the Stone of the Wise. And I've been saying it all week. The real essential essence of the quintessence, um, the um, the field that is produced by the other 4 fields of physics that physicists have not quite managed to pin down and find. When they're talking about the God particle, I've always thought that that's what they're really looking for. They may not know it yet. Um, the great vowel shift. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there. Okay, so the cube unfolds as a golden cross of 6 squares. Once opened, it reveals its secret treasure, a rose of 5 petals. There's another aspect of this rose, a rose of 49 petals, and this is important as well. Um, if you take into consideration that 4 plus 9 is 13, which is a number of initiation, and 1 plus 3 is 4, which is also a number of initiation. The reason for the 49 petals, that's the beginning, the tip of that particular iceberg. But it's a tale for another stream, because this still has got a little ways to go. Okay, so now we have on the cross the rose of 5 petals. And the point, the nothingness point, is still in the center of the rose. From time immemorial, the number 5 has symbolized the microcosm, the world of humanity. 5 fingers, 5 senses, head and extremity. And the number 6 has symbolized the microcosm, the greater world of deity. In the language of images, the rose of 5 crucified on the cross of 6 is a statement that tells us that as human beings, we are inextricably connected to the larger world, the larger reality of deity. As above, so below. The microcosm perfectly reflects the macrocosm. Adam was made in the image of God, and so forth. You might ask, if we are such perfect images of such perfection, why do things seem so imperfect? Why is there death and suffering? Why are there wars? Why are there fleas and black widow spiders? Why is there bad cholesterol? The answer is simple, but most of us are not yet equipped to accept it. We are already right here, right now, the perfect reflection of a perfect deity. The problem is that we do not have a clue who or what we really are. What we recognize as ourselves, the entity that laughs and weeps, that stubs its toe, falls in love, wins and loses, lives and dies, is not a true reflection of ourselves. We are something altogether different and more wonderful than anything we can imagine. Discovering that the rose of our human fiveness is wedded to the cross of deity's sixness is the first goal of every spiritual seeker. The next and last goal is for us to identify completely with our secret self, the holy guardian angel, the higher self, however you want to think about it, and come to the full realization that we are neither 5 nor 6, but a great big beautiful 11. 11. This endeavor, for lack of a better name, is called the Great Work. And in case you haven't seen these streams where I've talked about this, I'll give you a clue to why 1111 is 1111. You can think of the 4 elements. You can there's a lot of things, but if you think about the nature of synchronicity, and then you think about the veil and the balancing of antinomies, opposites, and the veil that separates everything, and you have an 11, and then you have the veil, and you have another 11, and consider symmetry, and the symmetry of the internal world and the external world is 1111. Hope I did that justice. It took me forever to figure that out too. But meditating in the Amazon rainforest is a pretty powerful. That's where I came to understand that. Okay, so uh, this endeavor of realizing our elevenness, uh, for lack of a better name, is called the Great Work. The Rose Cross of Being. This small rose cross is the supreme glyph of the mystery of being and the common denominator between the worlds of the rose and the world of the cross, between you and me and our huge and all encompassing counterpart. It is a single shining point of pure existence that radiates from the center of both the rose and the cross. An unstoppable chain of events is set in motion when the cubical stone of primal existence pops open to create what I will call the rose cross of being. Being now needs elbow room to manifest. Position, dimension, time, and space must be the next additions to the creation cycle. Four green barbs radiate in four directions from behind the rose as if to say to being, now that you are here, here's some place to put yourself. Um, and so from there, we have a pretty in-depth uh, basically he's describing the position of all of the petals and why there are certain attributes everywhere, and it's just way too much for us to get into now, and it's not as relevant as the next part, the rose cross of manifestation. So that was the simple large rose, and now we're dealing with the smaller petals on the outside rim, impelled by the creative dynamics that first form the small rose cross of being. The great rose crucifies itself on a large unfolded cube. For convenience sake, I will refer to the greater figure as the rose cross of manifestation, because it reveals the mysteries of the manifest universe, of principles, energies, and forces, represented by the great rose of 22 petals and the tarot trumps, crucified upon the cross of time and space and matter. These mysteries, we will soon see, abide in aces, court cards, and the small cards of the four suits. The tetragrammaton and the four suits. The Hebrew mystics determined that it was much easier to meditate upon and deal with the qualities of the Supreme Being if they hypothetically divided it, and consequently everything in the universe, including you and me, into four parts. To do this, they created the concept of a single God who exercised its omnipotence in fourfold manner. They even gave this God a four-letter name, the Hebrew letter Yod He Vav He and English letters YHVH, commonly pronounced Jehovah. And this is where we're coming up to a description of the actual process of creation, I hope. Man, yeah, this is way longer than the mystery of INRI is actually also included here. Oh, here we go. The secrets of the tree of life. Well, let's see. What time is that? How much battery do we have left? Okay, in a very real sense, YHVH is the God of creation. Creation is, after all, what we on earth, with our limited powers of perception, acknowledge as the reality of the world around us. Most of you reading this book, however, have a pretty good idea that there is more to the ultimate reality than things we can perceive with our senses. That also means that there is a much greater reality beyond, behind, and underlying the powers and forces that make up the God of creation. The Greeks gave a title to this creator God who thinks it is God but is too self-centered to realize that it too was created by something greater. They call it the demiurgos, or the demiurge. Zeus was a demiurge. Another name for Zeus is Jove, whose name spelled in Hebrew is uncomfortably close to Jehovah. So we have another element of the derivative nature of the composite myth that is Christianity. Because the demiurge is not sure of its origin, it is understandable that it would be a bit insecure. It might even refer to itself as a jealous god and forbid the worship of any other competing deities. The formula of YHVH divides the macrocosm into four descending worlds: absolute, the archetypal world, the environment of the consciousness of supreme deity; Beriah, the creative world, the world of the great archangelic forces. Yetzirah, the formative world, the world of the angelic forces that execute the specific duties of their archangelic masters. And Asaya, the material world. At the same time, the formula of tetragrammaton divides the microcosm and the human soul into four descending levels. Chaya, the life force, Nechema, the divine soul intuition, Ruach, the intellect, and Nefesh, the animal soul. Finally, all of these four-part concepts can be expressed metaphorically as the four elements of fire, water, air, and earth, which in the tarot are represented by the four suits, wands, cups, swords, and discs. When we speak of the four elements, we are not referring to the chemical elements that are the building blocks of matter. We're simply saying that for classification purpose, we divide everything in the universe into four very broad categories. If anything is something enough to call it something, then it is fiery, watery, airy, or earthy in nature, and falls into one of the four categories represented by YHVH and the four tarot suits. Interestingly, though, things can be air of water or fire of earth, and it took me a while to really wrap my head around how that could be, why that would be, but any change of which any thing is possible or capable can be caused through the proper application of the proper degree and kind of force in the proper manner to the proper object. And so we can observe the airy nature of water by boiling it and watching the steam evaporate. We can see the earthy nature of water by freezing the water and making it in the nature of a stone. We can see the watery nature of metal by heating it to extreme temperatures and watching it melt. And so for every phenomena in the universe, there is some sort of metaphorical or allegorical corollary. And so when we talk about reading the scripture that's writ large upon the land, this is the kind of stuff that we are getting at. So we're going to skip a little bit, but now we have at the top of the cross the swords, the intellect, the wands, the creative impulse and desire, the cups, which is like emotion, and the discs. This is our financial, fertility, foundation in this context. And so we also have an alchemical element that is associated with each of those. So skipping on to the alchemical symbols that are drawn upon the Hermetic Rose Cross. It's important to note that there are pentagrams also drawn at the top on the arm. So there's four pentagrams, and each one of those is associated with one of the four worlds of the soul that the Hebrew mystical tradition ascribes to it. Okay, so our examination of the Hermetic Rose Cross would be incomplete if we didn't examine the symbols of the three alchemical elements of sulfur, mercury, and salt, whose glyphs are found in the triple lobes at the end of each arm of the Great Cross. Not to be confused with the natural elements of fire, water, air, earth, and spirit, the three alchemical elements represent universal qualities or principles that interact with and are profoundly dependent upon each other. Crowley tells us that sulfur is active energy, desire. Mercury is fluidity, intelligence, the power of transmission. Salt is the vehicle of these two forms of energy, but itself possesses qualities which react on them. And I'll sort of divert for a second and give you another example of these mysteries manifesting on Earth in remarkable ways. And we can come up with a whole host of potential explanations for this. But recently, archaeologists digging in Mexico, not Mayan ruins, the tribe that is very little known. They don't even have a name for this culture, but they have like ziggurat style pyramids underground that have been dug up. and there are burial chambers. And when you enter the burial chamber, there's sort of a moat of mercury, and um, mercury to me is like the the it's like a manifestation of the quintessence almost, and things that are very close to this fundamentally, I don't know how to say it, things that are of their that express the essence of the quintessence in their being. I'm not doing a good job with this. Well, let me continue with this story, and maybe that'll do it for me. Um, Mercury is, very important to the Hermetic tradition, I guess, a simple way to say it. As it turns out, there are also these moats of Mercury around some of the burial chambers in Egypt. And it's funny to watch scientists grasp for explanations. And what they actually ultimately settled on is that, well, it was probably kind of rare, so they just thought that, well, like, kind of like gold, that. And it's like, man, you guys, come on. Hermes is Mercury. He's a psychopomp. He delivers the dead, across not across the river Styx, but from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. And this association is not some arbitrary shit that people make up. Uh, every concept has its physical correlating manifestation, right? And so, there's this brilliant quote that I attribute to Robert Anton Wilson. I think that's correct, that all that is metaphor. And that statement right there is, I think, one of the greatest elucidations of the secrets of the mysteries that you will ever encounter. And if you can learn to perceive and unravel and decode and discover the metaphors that are presented in nature, this is how we come to this kind of occult knowledge. Uh, yeah, and Susan is saying that there is rumored pool of mercury beneath the Sphinx. I mean, and it's really interesting as well that these beings that are associated with, like, Hermes and Mercury, which is a planet but also metal. And it's also strange, I don't think that when these attributions were, or these correspondences were attributed to Mercury and the metal, Mercury is a very gray, silvery kind of planet. I don't think that the ancients could have seen it that clearly. That's kind of odd as well. Um, okay, but let's continue on with this alchemical symbol stuff. By the way, for you guys just popping on, please do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. We're demonetized, so we get no money for anything. We have no super chat. So there are all sorts of different choices to support in the description. Okay, so notice that, okay, we already read that. The secondary lobes of each arm are occupied with symbols of the not so dominant alchemical principles arranged in a logical and balanced manner. This is very important because when these three principles are combined and balanced, they create the alchemical substance known as vitriol, the universal solvent. Vitriol will soon become very important to us as we study the inner mechanics of the tarot. It is the initials of the alchemical motto, Visita Interiora Terra Rectificando, Invi, Invi, Invenius Occultum Lapidum. I'm sorry, my Latin is probably atrocious because it doesn't exist. Visit the interior parts of the earth. By rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone. In the discussion of the trumps, Crowley goes so far as to identify three cards with the alchemical elements. The Magus is mercury, the Empress is salt, and the Emperor is sulfur. Other trumps have alchemical significance. The art card is identified with vitriol, and the lovers, the hermit, the death, and the devil all have vital roles to play in the alchemy of the tarot. Um, the Orphic egg is, representing the essence of all life that comes under the formula of male and female. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's also the three gunas, which are correspondences to um, the three, sulfur constituent, or the alchemical constituents have, corresponding gunas. Um, And so now we're moving on to the barbed rose leaves. Radiating like glories from behind the great rose are 12 barbed rose leaves, 4 large leaves, each flanked by 2 small leaves. The 4 large leaves contain the letters INRI and the astrological symbols for Virgo, Scorpio, Soul, and Virgo again, respectively. 3 of the smaller leaves contain the letters LVX, and 3 contain the letters IAO. The remaining 2 smaller leaves contain an additional letter I and small cavalry cross. To be perfectly frank, I have never learned a satisfactory explanation for the presence or positioning of these 2 seemingly superfluous figures. But I'm sure you guys recognize the. No, it's not from Regarty's book. It's from Lon Milo Duquette's Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. Um, but it just gets into so many of the different aspects of the mysteries under the one, under the jurisprudence of the the Rosy Cross. Oh, look at that! Something to drink. I just thought it made a really good overview of the entirety of the mysteries to take kind of a deep dive into this. And I'm sure you guys will recognize INRI from the cross, LVX, the light um, of the Western occult, and IAO, which has a lot of potential different interpretations. But interestingly, there is a linguistic rule in English that those letters, when they are found in words, always should go in that order. Um, and I could do a whole 30-minute video on those letters. So I'm not going to try to explain too much, but let's talk about the letters I and RI are placed on the large leaves. I in the upper left, N upper right, R lower left, and I lower right. The letters IAO and an extra I are placed on the smaller leaves to the right of the large leaves in the same order. The letters LVX and a small cavalry cross are placed on the smaller leaves to the left of the large leaves in the same order. Because the Hermetic Rose Cross is the personal lantern of Adeptus Minor initiates of the Golden Dawn, and because the letters INRI, LVX, and IAO play a key formulaic role in the mysteries of that degree, and really all the mysteries, it is very appropriate that they appear on the device itself. INRI can mean many things, including the venerable alchemical axiom, Igni natura renovatur integra. All of nature is restored, not destroyed. All of nature is restored by fire. And the powerful spell that I often use to repel obnoxious telemarketers. I'm not really interested in Christian tradition. Wait, excuse me. Christian tradition, however, informs us that at Christ's crucifixion, Pontius Pilate ordered that a sign be posted at the head of the cross declaring in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, Jesus of Nazareth, King of Jews. The real sign must have been pretty large to accommodate the 3 sets of messages, but future artists would be satisfied to display only the 4 letters, INRI, painted on a wooden board nailed at an angle above the head of the tortured and bleeding Jesus. For at least 1400 years, the placard displaying the Latin letters INRI has been an indispensable accessory to every well-dressed crucifix. Not being satisfied with the officially sanctioned explanation of these letters that appear in the holy images and souvenirs, Christian mystics and others toyed with the heretical idea that there just might be something else, some esoteric meaning to the images of popular religious symbolism. Risking the stake, these spiritual outlaws proceeded to analyze INRI in such a way that eventually said something other than Jesus from Nazareth, King of the Jews, that something else was the magical formula and the signs of that formula that expressed their highest understanding of the cosmic secrets of life, death, and resurrection. This is really good, so pay attention. The first They first took the Latin letters INRI and translated them into the Hebrew letters, reading from left to right, Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod. Then they meditated upon the astrological meanings of these Hebrew letters and discovered that they tell, in their own astrological way, the familiar Egyptian solar myth of Isis, who mourns because an evil relative, Apophis, Nun or Scorpio, has killed her husband, Osiris, Resh or Sol. Isis eventually raises Osiris from the dead, and the whole cycle starts again every morning and every spring, hence the second eye. the resurrection. That is how INRI becomes IAO, which just happens to be the name of the supreme god of the Gnostics, which embodies the magical formula of life, death, and rebirth. Properly understood, the formula of INRI and IAO explains the mystery of the annual revolution of the Earth around the Sun and its diurnal rotation spun upon its axis. That is the highest mystery our Assyrian age ancestors understood. It is also the secret mystery knowledge of all agricultural civilizations by the age of Osiris. Not bad for 7 letters, 3 of which are I's. By tradition, Isis, Apophis, and Osiris, that's the IAO, are pictured making certain gestures or signs. In the sign of the morning of Isis, Isis holds her arms, suggestive of the letter I. The sign of Apophis and Typhon, Apophis thrusts his arms above his head in a 90-degree angle, suggestive of the letter V. And so you can see all of these signs of Apophis and Isis in Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice. Magical tradition informs us that on the material plane and in normal waking consciousness, symbols are symbols and living things are living things. On the magical plane and in visionary consciousness, symbols are living things and living things are symbols. In other words, if I have a vision of a lion or a monkey, those images are merely symbols of something far deeper and abstract in my psyche that I need to confront. Conversely, symbols and visions are actually living things in that plane. Let's say I am faced in a vision by a terrible fire demon, a symbol of something I need to confront. I need only protect myself with a symbol, perhaps the banishing pentagram of fire, a symbol to one of the mastery, a symbol to me of the mastery of spirit over the elements, but a living thing to the demon who is forced by all the laws of its own existence to submit and obey. I only bring this tidbit of magical lore to impress upon you the immeasurable symbolic power stored in the Hermetic Rose Cross. Viewed on the magical plane, the cross is teeming with magnificent life and energy. The adepts of the Golden Dawn who wear it on as their personal lamen are possessed with the most powerful magical tool indeed. Um, and so, finally, my favorite part of this whole bunch of shenanigans, an explanation of the Kabbalistic tree of life. Um, we're down to 9 troopers. Man, yeah, I mean, this is a lot of information. But he asked, and that's why I got this book, because, Fernando asked, "Can you talk about the Rose Cross?" And I'm like, "Yeah, for 7 hours." I mean, and it's going to go all over the place, So better to have this as a guide. Okay, so now we are talking about the Kabbalistic tree of life. And here's a quote from the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. Yah, the Lord of hosts, the living God, King of the universe, omnipotent, all-kind and merciful, supreme and extolled, who is eternal, sublime, and most holy, ordained or formed and created the universe in 32 mysterious paths of wisdom by 3 seraphim, namely Sphor, Sippur, and Sapphir, which are in him one and the same. They consist out of a decade, out of nothing, and of 22 fundamental letters. He divided the 22 consonants into 3 divisions: 3 mothers, fundamental letters or first element, 7 double, and 12 simple consonants. In the previous chapter, we learned about the 32 mysterious paths of wisdom and how they're comprised of 22 letters. Now we'll learn just a little bit about the decade out of nothing. We 10-fingered bipeds have always had a healthy respect for the numbers 10 and 4. As a matter of fact, it appears that our hands and fingers are the source of much ancient Kabbalistic meditation, wisdom that would later help construct the tarot. I won't bore you too much with the subject, but I will pause to point out that the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Yod, the Hebrew word for hand. Our opposable thumb, working in cooperation with the other 4 fingers, is one of the most important attributes that separates humans from other animals and is the fundamental key to making us creative beings and the masters of our environment. As tradition informs us that we are made in the image of deity, it follows that the creative hand of God must be the work of a single deity that expresses itself in a 4-fold manner. 4 Kabbalistic worlds, 4 parts of the soul, 4 elements, 4 tarot suits, 4 court cards. 4 and 10 are inextricably related. and mutually definable by simple mathematics. 10 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Um, Angels, and the following is an excerpt from Angels and Demons of the Gods of the New Millennium. I think it's the same author, where he explains the decade out of nothing. And this is where that ayahuasca vision that I told you guys about a long time ago, and again tonight, where the nothing divided, and then I saw all of the different divisions and how it all went down and all of its interdimensional glory. This is a different way of describing it that's identical. Um, the tree of life is a linear schematic of 10 emanations and 22 paths upon which the universal mechanics of energy and consciousness are projected. In one respect, it is a very unsatisfactory diagram, for it attempts to dimensionalize the transdimensional. It has been called the diagram of the anatomy of God. And if we indeed are created in the image of God, then that means that it also reveals the spiritual anatomy of each of us. Students of Kundalini Yoga agree and point out that the 7 chakras or spiritual centers in the human body can be projected quite comfortably upon the tree of life. In fact, the tree of life, the sephira, are basically the chakras plus extras. All 10 sephirot or emanations of the tree are really only aspects or facets of the top sephira, the light, the crown, Keter, which represents the totality of existence, the supreme monad. But even the concept of one is a blemish upon the sublime perfection of the pre-existent zero. Remember how I was saying that, the only possible unity is nothingness. So that statement that he made is kind of revelatory along those lines. If one is to exist and become conscious of its oneness, it must reflect itself, like a yogi in meditation who reaches to the core of being and exclaims, "This is what I am." The mere act of reflection creates two. One is now conscious of itself and its reflection. The knowledge that there is a difference between one and two instantly creates a third condition. This trinity by itself is still an abstraction and exists only in potentiality. Nevertheless, a primal pattern has been established by the process of one becoming three. This archetypal germ sets into motion a chain reaction that animates the entire creation scenario, the process of consciousness, light, spirit descending into matter. The phenomenal universe manifests through a process of degeneration in the next 7 sephirot. So the Trinity unit 456 is created by the reflection of the 1, 2, 3 unit. Antinomies again, and the same process that created 3 from 1, 2 creates the third Trinity unit of 7, 8, 9, 10. And the world of matter is a rock bottom and dangles from the tree of life like an afterthought of creation. But of course, its corollary is its exact opposite. It's an antinomy at the top, which is the pure light. And we find from modern physics that they're one and the same. The light, because matter is light in a standing wave. And so at the base or the bottom, the foundation, Malkut on the tree of life, we have earth of air, and at the top we just have air. You know what I mean? It's light in Keter, and it's also and there was actually a rabbi that said Keter is in Malkut, Malkut is in Keter, but after another fashion. So this is this understanding that light is matter and matter is light, right? Keter is light and matter is light in a standing wave. So at the bottom of the tree of life, we also have light again in another form. So this ancient rabbi is saying this, 200 years, well, not really ancient, but 200 years or so before physics, before science determined that light is matter in a standing wave. We had the Kabbalah telling us this much. So Malkut dangles from the tree of life like an afterthought of creation. This is the decade out of nothing. It is the fundamental pattern of creation. Theoretically, every conceivable idea, quality, principle, aspect, and tendency finds a home in one of the 10 pigeonhole sephirot of the tree of life. But the Hebrew mystics were not satisfied with just one tree of life. God is one, true, but the one God has a four-letter name, YHVH, by which it manifests. And so the ancient Kabbalists found it easier to meditate upon the qualities of one by considering it in terms of four. Consequently, for practical purposes, and especially for tarot, we find ourselves dealing with four trees of life representing the four elements, Yod He Vav He, the four Kabbalistic worlds, the four parts of the soul, the four elements, and the four tarot suits. The titles of the 10 Sephirot are consistent in all four tree of life. And so uh, that's good for now, but that's basically a relatively brief synopsis of the symbolism of the Rosy Cross. And all of those ideas, this is like one mystery school tradition of the Western occult, and of borrowing heavily from Hebrew mysticism, but the essential concepts are the same throughout all of the mysteries. And I think that this the fact that we have this, the earliest depiction of the Kabbalistic tree of life was like 1659, I think, something along those lines. But I would assume that the concept is much older. But even without having to anchor it to antiquity any further back, the fact that we have this idea of light crystallizing at the base of the process of creation is quite a remarkable coincidence, I guess. And that is basically what the Kabbalistic tree of life really is. Um, and so, as Iwas told Aleister Crowley in the Book of the Law, your success will be your proof. And I think that when we look through the annals, the compendium of mystery traditions and their techniques and the derivatives, the knowledge that they have the knowledge that they have uncovered, their proof, their it's this, your proof will be your success. The mysteries can lay claim to that. You know what I mean? Because there are instances where adepts and their models have predated scientific discovery by hundreds or even thousands of years, as is the case of Plato and the atom. Um, and I think one of the most wondrous things about these techniques and the sort of psychological state and the mindfulness training that's required to, it's like becoming a feedback loop. Once the process is started, once thou hast settest thou foot upon the path, a phantom pursueth thee. Uh, I wish I could remember that entire uh, Book of Lies section. Let me see if I can find it. If the Sodom apple. That's the one it is. But you understand what I'm saying. Once this process has been initiated, um, it just doesn't stop, and it's just, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my archetype, because I've always been doing it, ever since childhood. It's this, but I think that's what initiation is, whether you've always been in that state or not. Once it's truly catalyzed, you really can't get out of it. It's like everything contains its contradiction, and it's a blessing and a curse. O thou that setteth out upon the path, false is the phantom that thou seekest. When thou hast it, thou shalt know all bitterness, thy teeth fixed in the Sodom apple. Thus hast thou been lured along that path, whose terror else had driven thee far away. O thou that stridest upon the middle of the path, no phantoms mock thee. For the stride's sake thou stridest. Thus art thou lured along that path whose fascination else had driven thee far away. O thou that drawest toward the end of the path, effort is no more. Faster and faster dost thou fall. Thy weariness is changed into ineffable rest. For there is no thou upon that path. Thou has become the way. That's a pretty good one, I reckon. Where are you guys? Okay, there you are. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I've been talking for a very long time. I have been doing very uh, yeah, that's what I thought. You're gonna trip out on this. Fernando, you said you kept hearing as Azrael as I was speaking. Azrael is sort of like a demon or a spirit in the Aramaic tradition, but it's basically Hermes Thoth, who has been, one of the focuses of this live stream. It's a psychopomp that separates the soul of the living and brings it to the land of the dead, basically. Um, so that's interesting that you were hearing that. I don't know what you meant by you're hearing that, but it's basically another expression of that. It appears as in Islam and some traditions of Judaism, and is also even referenced in Sikhism. And it says, it's a psychopomp. Um, again, it's a variation or another correspondence of Hermes, God's angel of death, responsible for transporting the souls of the deceased after their death. In Islam and in Judaism, he is said to hold a scroll concerning the fate of mortals, recording and erasing their names at their birth and death, respectively. Um, yeah, so that's super trippy that we're talking about Hermes and his role, and you say that you're hearing Azrael, which is the same thing. This is the only show in town. Yeah, it is frustrating that I have a relatively small audience still. Sometimes I go back and I watch some of this stuff, and I realize that there's not a lot, nothing really like this out there. But I made a discovery today. We know that since I've been demonetized, that they actually bury my stuff, right? So the Lucifer live stream that I did last night, the way that the algorithm works is that if you have a very high like to view ratio, then it pushes your content out, right? So at one point I had 50% of the people that watched it almost liked it, which means that it should have been pushed out to thousands of people. And because I've been demonetized, it doesn't do that. So I had this like crazy, and then how long each viewer watches is also supposed to compel the algorithm to push the material, to push the content out. Nope. The average watch was 20 minutes, which is crazy long. Most videos, a good average is like 30 seconds because people just keep going, right? And then 40% likes, and the algorithm still ignored it. So it's extremely difficult for me to get any traction. So I really do appreciate when you guys share, and also, supporting us with BNB to the crypto wallet or one of the other choices in the description for supporting us. I really appreciate it because my content is buried by the algorithm and we get no money. So, um, yeah, that's really interesting, Fernando, that this corollary of Hermes appeared to you. Um, we can also check in with the Kabbalion, I guess, since I still have 20% of my battery left. Um, and I really like the description of the mysteries and the secret doctrine that is given here in the introduction. And I guess this can be a teaser to my uh, I'm going to do a really long, in-depth commentary to the Kabbalion this week. I just got my computer back. The microphone still isn't working, which is really sad. Yeah, well, it's. I mean, you guys know how much time I put into this, and I mean, it's kind of crazy that I from YouTube I get zero. I mean, if I had 50 cents from each subscriber, I would have $2,500 a month, and on average, it's probably more like 200 or something. And since I put like 60 hours a month into this, it's kind of crazy, really. Sometimes I wonder like why I'm still putting so much energy into it. But I guess it's just that I believe in what I'm doing, and I don't see anyone really out there doing it in the way that I am. And I know that some of you appreciate it a lot, so I keep doing it. Um, we take great pleasure in presenting to the attention of students and investigators of the secret doctrine this little work based on the world-old Hermetic teachings. There has been so little written upon this subject, notwithstanding the countless references to the teachings in many works upon occultism, that the many earnest searchers after the arcane truths will doubtless welcome the appearance of this present volume. The purpose of this work is not the enunciation of any special philosophy or doctrine, but rather it is to give to the students a statement of the truth that will serve to reconcile the many bits of occult knowledge that they may have acquired, but which are apparently opposed to each other and which often serve to discourage and disgust the beginner in study. Our intent is not to erect a new temple of knowledge, but rather to place in the hands of the student a master key with which he may open the many doors in the temple of mystery through the many portals that he has already entered. Um, I mean, I think it's more like dozens, Fernando, but I appreciate the sentiment. Um, um, but I mean, this is one of the things I really like about the Kabbalion. There's no dogma, there's no and everything he's saying is true. It Yeah, yeah, I know, but getting demonetized really killed our momentum, man. I mean, it was like 1,000 views in a couple of days, and it's getting there again though. Actually, we're breaking records for the channel this month in terms of subscribers and views and stuff. So we are overcoming the algorithm. And you guys should see the message I got from Facebook. I am banned for 30 days from posting in groups. I have like 8 restrictions on my Facebook account, and they said it was for promoting false information. But I looked at the posts that they were claiming were false, and they were like opinions. It's not even like it's crazy, man. The level of censorship that's happening now. So what I'm saying is, I really need you guys to share these videos because they really are burying my shit. If I post on Facebook, what it's saying is that it actually they said at least 90 days we will place your posts in very low priority in people's feeds, so most people won't see them. And so 90 days, 30 days I can't post in groups, and just for this type of content. No, Fernando. So far, I have 50 subscribers on the other channel. I don't. They might know it's me. You know what I mean? I don't know. I will keep trying to do that. But so, anyways, like that's I really appreciate that about the Kabbalion. And when he says that it's a master key to understanding all of this other crap, think about the how the point became a cube and then exploded and sacrificed itself on the cross, right? And also how like the ultimate the deity is nothingness, and so it has no awareness. It's not there in a sense. It's given its consciousness up so that we can have consciousness. um, and so, if you have this knowledge of the mysteries, when you look at these fairy tales, you can see what they're actually talking about and understand the deeper metaphors. And so, in a quite literal sense, study of the mystery gives you a greater depth of, um, you know, richer experience of life. And my light just went out. So, and my phone's going to die any minute now too. So, and so he goes on to say that there is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings, which have come down to us over the tens of centuries which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. So how crazy is that too, Fernando? The scribe of the gods thing. Azrael, that you said you just had a vision of while I was talking about Hermes, also is a scribe of the gods. So the correlation between Azrael and Hermes is pretty thorough. So that was crazy that happened. Um, uh, So the scribe of the gods who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy, contemporary with Abraham, and if the legends be true, an instructor of that venerable sage, Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have been promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race may be traced back to Hermes. Even the most ancient teachings of India undoubtedly have their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. And Azrael is a cartoon cat as well, but that's not the one you were thinking about, I don't think. Uh, and it's true what he's saying. And even if it's not that they're directly derivative of the Hermetic, the Corpus Hermeticum specifically, uh, the truths that inform that work are the fundamental essence of all of those other traditions. When you take all of the superstition and all of the fairy tales, strip them away, and you look at the wiring under the board, what you have is the teachings of the mysteries. Um, and really, it's not just the teachings of the mysteries. It is the gnosis, the fruits of gnosis, right? Because a lot of this stuff really can't be taught. I can give you ideas and information that might create fertile ground for seeds that can grow um, into knowledge. But until there is gnosis, they're just potential. Just as when the original point of nothingness contained all of that potential until information gave it some direction, and then experience yielded the universe. This is the same. Uh, from the land of the Ganges, many advanced occultists wandered in the land of Egypt and sat at the feet of the master. From him they obtained the master key, which explained and reconciled their divergent views, and thus the secret doctrine was firmly established. From other hands also came the learned ones, all of whom regarded Hermes as the master of masters, and his influence was so great that in spite of the many wanderings from the path on the part of the centuries of teachers in these different lands, they may still be found a certain basic resemblance and correspondences which underlie the many and often quite divergent theories entertained and taught by the occultists of these different lands today. The student of comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of the name now known to man, whether it be a dead religion or in full vigor. There is always a certain correspondence in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as the great reconciler. And again, that's because these are the fundamental truths that lie behind all of these systems. Um, I actually don't like calling it the Hermetic teachings because we're not really so sure that Hermes was even a real person. I like to put the heading secret doctrine on it, or Huxley's perennial philosophy. Um, yeah, that was crazy that you saw Azrael while we were talking about Hermes, man. That's just nutty as hell. Um, And so the life work of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting this great seed truth, which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by him have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men in each age who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There have always been a few initiates in each generation in the various lands of the earth who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamp of the outside world. When the light of truth grew dim and cooled and clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter, there were always a few to tend faithfully the altar of truth, upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. Those men devoted their lives to the labor of love, which the past poet has so well stated in the lines, "Oh, let not the flame die out. Cherish age after age in its dark cavern, in its holy temples cherished, fed by pure ministers of love, let not the flame die out." These men have never sought popular approval or numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth or who would recognize it even if it was presented to them. They reserve strong meat for men, while others furnish the milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns, instead of casting them before the materialistic vulgar swine who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still, these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those ready to receive it. As the Kabbalion states, "Where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teaching open wide. And again, when the ears of the students are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom." But their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism, "The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding." And again, one of the other conditions of this um, is that a lot of this stuff can't be understood by just teaching. Um, there are those who have criticized this attitude of the Hermeticists and who have claimed that they did not manifest the proper spirit in their policy of seclusion and reticence. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the masters who knew the folly of attempting to teach to the world that which is neither ready or willing to receive. The Hermeticists have never sought to be martyrs and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips while the heathen raged noisily about them. In their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians a truth capable of being understood only by an elect who had advanced along the path. And the spirit of persecution has not as yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings which, if publicly promulgated, would bring down upon the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement with the multitude, who would again raise the cry of "Crucify, crucify." In this little work, we have endeavored to give you the fundamental teachings of the Kabbalion, striving to give you the working principles, leaving you to apply them yourselves rather than attempting to work out the teaching in detail. If you are a true student, you will be able to work out and apply these principles. Otherwise, they will be as words, words, words. Yeah, Huxley was the shit. Um, and what are you saying about how people will, Oscar Wilde again, if you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh, otherwise they will kill you. And the African proverb that he who speaks the truth has few friends. We all know the tendency of they martyr the iconoclasts, basically. And there's also something to consider, that when you are really talking about the truth and the fact, for example, that like light creates darkness and darkness creates light, because without matter, which is darkness, to obstruct light, you couldn't perceive the matter, right? So this also extends to the fact that like good creates evil and evil creates good. And if you really want to go down the rabbit hole with that one, you can see where you start to get yourself in trouble with like normie humans that are not going to be able to get past their subjective humanity, to even contemplate these mysteries as if they were a god, and then you can sort of compartmentalize and return to your human self. There's a Tool song where he says that we need to swing on the spiral of our divinity and still be human, and that's kind of what he was talking about. So that's just a good example of where the persecution can come from, because one of the necessities of explaining illumination is understanding the role of evil in the universe. And so from old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings, which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and people for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine, all nations have borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Medea, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece and Rome, and other ancient countries partook liberally of the feast of knowledge, which the hierophants and masters of the lands of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake of the great store of mystic and occult lore, which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed and who seldom have been equaled during the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the days of the great Hermes. In Egypt was located the great lodge of lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temples entered the neophytes, who afterwards, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready, anxious, and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive them. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to these venerable masters of the ancient land. But among those great masters of ancient Egypt, there once dwelt one of whom masters hailed the master of masters. This man, if man indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus, although he was not. He was known as Thoth in Egypt and Hermes in Greece, but we'll forgive the author for this transgression. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of this alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history owing to the lapse